women are expected to be perfect. Men are expected to just exist. You know what I mean? So, but the thing that I see as problematic is when women are now upholding those things. Because, I'm Nigerian, for example, and in my part of the country, I see certain cultural practices that are not necessarily the best, that don't favor women, but they're being held up by other women. So the women implement those things and the men just sit aside and let it happen. But I'm like, you're implementing something that you know is going to come back to you when your time comes. So we need to learn how to get rid of the things that don't serve us and support each other and just be open.
Welcome to Lunch with Leaders, the podcast where we explore what it takes to lead, thrive, and create lasting impact. I'm Adesemeju Dogalayam, a TEDx speaker, leadership strategist, and the founder of African Women in STEM. Each episode features insightful conversations with innovators, trailblazers, and leaders from around the world who are transforming cultures, redefining leadership, and shaping the future of work. Together, we'll share the stories, strategies, and mindsets that will empower women in STEM to amplify their visibility, influence, and impact. So if you're ready to lead boldly, amplify your voice, and help influence what leadership looks like for women in STEM, hit follow, share this podcast, and join us every week for impactful conversations, powerful story, and practical strategies.
I'm so excited that you're joining us on this episode. And our guest today is Natasha Henry. Oh my goodness, I've been waiting for this interview for a very long time. So I'm going to go ahead and read her bio so you know how incredible she is. She's awesome. So Natasha is the founder of Myocurrent, where she leads the development of adaptive clinical intelligence systems designed to bridge the gap between medical pathology and psychological trauma in women's health. Her work is defined by a radical intersection of discipline. She's currently navigating a unique path through neuroscience, AI, and medicine at NYU Abu Dhabi, complemented by a specialized executive training in AI and entrepreneurship from the University of Oxford and digital health certification from the World Health Organization. Her transition from business corporate background to health tech was catalyzed by a 2024 near-death experience that involved fibroid complications, blood transfusions, and a hemoglobin level of 2.4. This traumatic series of events transformed her into a patent researcher, and she's dedicated to dismantling the normalization of pain. She's a semi-finalist and a participant in several accelerators and competitions where she advocates for the integration of patient lived experience into high-level clinical innovation. I'm sure so many people listening to this are like, this is what we've been waiting for years, because this whole idea that women just have to take pain and absorb it and it's nothing, and beauty is pain, it's normal. No, we're not doing that anymore. But welcome to the show, Natasha. I'm so happy to have you here, and thank you for joining us. Yeah, I'm so happy to chat. I mean, I've been seeing things on the internet where they try to simulate like women's pain, maybe during like childbirth or period with men, and they just can't handle it for even a microsecond. But we have to put ourselves together and still show up every single day and do the things that we do. So I'm ready to jump into the questions. Okay, let's do this. So I was talking to someone yesterday and we were talking about, because I'm the founder of African Women in STEM, and like, why did you start it? And I'm like, for most people, when they start something, for me, it was because I was trying to address something I experienced. Now, you had an incredible career, but you had an experience in your life that made you transition into health tech because you needed to provide the solutions that you couldn't find, and you know that a lot of women need. So can you tell us more about this experience and why you're doing this right now.
And at that time, I was experiencing symptoms. So I would go to the doctor and say, hey, these are my symptoms. And, naturally they would say normal. Now, this is years of this happening. So at some point, the symptoms are, they're progressively worsening, right? So it got to the point where it started affecting my quality of life, right? My social interactions, even my productivity at work. And to go to the doctor and for them to keep saying it's normal or to take hormonal therapy, aka birth control, to alleviate the symptoms, and it wasn't working. And what happened was that in 2023, I was on my way to ice skating. And it took me a long time to get ready for the day. And still, I was still trying to push through. I was gaslighting myself. I said, okay, maybe I'm, it's the season is changing. Maybe I'm not working out or eating as great as I should be, right? And the things that we do every day, right? We gaslight ourselves. When I get to the ice skating rink, I'm having a hard challenge to go around the rink. It took me maybe an hour, and it should have taken me 15 minutes. By the end of that evening, I collapsed on the floor. I'm in the bathroom. The EMT comes and they take me into the vitals were extremely low. And because my vitals were low, that prompted the hospital to say, okay, let's look at what happened. Now, I'm so thankful I went to a great hospital. It's actually a research hospital as well. It's like a pipeline to in Colombia. And so they were adamant about finding how did my level get so low? So 2.4 for hemoglobin is like the lowest we've ever seen, according to that. For context, for women, our hemoglobin, our blood levels really are between 11 and 14. That's normal. For men, they have a little higher threshold. When you are 7 hemoglobin, level of 7, you're considered anemic, right? You may need a blood transfusion. So 2.4 is like borderline. Sorry, 2.8 over the first day, borderline, like very low. For additional context, they were saying that the lowest they've seen before me was around 3, and that was a cancer patient, elderly gentleman, right? Kind of give you some percentage. And then for them, they were surprised. And you shouldn't even be walking around. Like, you should be, having some type of assistance. And it goes to show you how strong we are as individuals, right? That we kind of push. Our bodies will do what it needs to keep us alive. They gave me a transfusion that day. The next day, it went down to 2.4. So I was just losing a lot of blood. I ended up being in ICU for about a week. Go back to the hospital, but there was a series of hospitalizations that eventually led to that a myocurrent fibroid. Now the fibroids, there was one fibroid that was not to be so graphic, but it was coming out of my uterus. And so it was comforting and still scary to hear the doctor say your menstrual cramps probably feel like you're pregnant. Probably feel like you're, about to go into labor. I said, yeah, I don't have labor, right? So this is just like an assumption that saying, hey, I cannot move. These symptoms are debilitating. And for the longest, as I mentioned, the doctors kept saying it's normal. So for the first time, they validate my pain and say, hey, you're dilated. Like, your cervix is dilated. It's like you're about to give, birth at some point. It was great to hear that I was being seen. And, in that moment where you're in the hospital, you don't know what's going to happen, you're scared, right? You have all these doctors and all these tests and everything. Your levels are low across the board. Platelets, iron, all of the things are low. You're at risk of heart failure. It's a traumatizing experience. And it makes you look at your life and say, okay, one, how do I take back, what I think I lost? And two, so I'm lucky that I was able to have those people that hospital. There's so many women that and as I was talking to some, more women throughout my journey, I just saw and witnessed how many women go through it, how many women have gaslit themselves with saying it's okay, it happened, how many women have had hysterectomy because of it. Whether or not you want to have children, family planning, removing, uterus is a big part of your experience as a woman, right? your hormones change. It changes a lot in your physiology. And so there is not as much support and activity in women's health in general. It's an under-researched, under-invested space, funded. So, for me, like if I can help someone, it would be a drop in the ocean, but it would drop that help them.
Yeah, I mean, as you're speaking, I think it was in 2011. No, yeah, 2011, I believe. I had surgery because I don't know what was going on, but for me, it seemed like it just happened, but it didn't quite just happen. But I ended up having surgery to remove, like it was a growth from my pelvis, but by the time they removed it, it was 11 pounds, and it grew to 11 pounds in just a couple of weeks. And luckily, I went to Mayo Clinic. My cousin was there. It was the best of the best. I was able to get it because normally the wait list is like 6 months and things like that. But the reason I brought it up is that when I started talking to my friends, literally everybody I talked to had some issue or the other. I was like, why don't we talk about these things? And it's one of those things where you're supposed to be normal. And if you're not, you keep quiet. And then only when somebody opens up, then you open up as well. So it's like, it doesn't mean that everybody is going through something and we don't know about it. And I see it all the time too. So this is really important. And I think to your point where you said that women's health is under research as well, most of the time you go and they tell you we don't know what's wrong with you. Even people that have multiple miscarriages, they'll be like, oh, we don't know. It's just a black box. So I believe the work that you're doing is going to make a difference for women, and especially for Black women in general, because this whole fibroid thing is particular to us. A lot of people, for example, in the United States that I know of, have a hard time getting the right treatment because, again, nobody knows what this is, and they don't even know how to take care of them. I'm so happy you're doing this, and I'm looking forward to what's going to come out of it. So you describe yourself as a patient researcher. So basically, you refuse to accept dismissal. Like when people tell you, "Oh, you don't have to worry about it," like, "No, I'm not doing it." And I think also, again, based on what you told us about your experience, that's another reason why, because women are always dismissed, and you're not going to do that. So, what does it look like? What does leadership look like? Because it takes someone that believes in themselves to an extent and stands up and is like, "I'm going to lead this cause, and no matter what." What does it look like when you stop asking for permission and refuse to be like minimized or sidelined or just dismissed?
I will say it's a great question. I would say it starts from my family, right? Like that confidence, something I have to account for, right? Because there's a lot of courage it takes to go through the and start, right? And there's confidence that comes from that, and I think because of my parents and that self-assurance. So, life, you're figuring yourself out, right? You're learning your voice. One thing I would recommend anyone do is learn your voice and learn how to use it. But going through that, and I think when it comes to leadership, it's something that I had the example of leadership as a child and stepping into that. And I think ultimately, in some of my COVID roles, going through those going through leadership where you're still asking for promotion, you're being performative, right? You're hoping that they see you, that they honor that, and at times they do, right? To some extent, at times they don't. And at certain point, you want to take control of your own destiny, right? Your own career. You recognize it's not really seen or valued. That's something that Black women we struggle with, right? People not understanding the value of seeing it or acknowledging it, or even if they do see it, they don't know. Right? So these are things that we have to deal with, particularly in America. One thing that I wish that we do more as sisterhood is that we don't look at someone not knowing something as like ignorant, or how are we truly uplifting each other outside of again the performative part, or how do we really encourage each other to be stronger, because we're only as strong as we are, right? So we have to kind of come together, and I believe that as I'm walking on purpose, that is exactly what happened.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so many things you touched on that if we start, we'll probably spend like 5 hours talking about it. But I want to bring up, because, this is Women's History Month, and I'm all about women, helping women, women empowering women. You say something about like instead of making somebody feel like if they don't know something, that's a problem, to actually encourage them. And I've had this conversation before. I mean, part of it is that culturally, I don't care where you're from. Women are expected to be perfect. Men are expected to just exist. You know what I mean? So, but the thing that I see as problematic is when women are now upholding those things. Because, I'm Nigerian, for example, and in my part of the country, I see certain cultural practices that are not necessarily the best, that don't favor women, but they're being held up by other women. So the women implement those things and the men just sit aside and let it happen. But I'm like, you're implementing something that you know is going to come back to you when your time comes. So we need to learn how to get rid of the things that don't serve us and support each other and just be open. And I mean, you're building a business right now, especially in entrepreneurship, not so much in the professional life, because again, it kind of carries over. We understand that failure is great. Okay, it's good. I mean, if you go through and you build everything and you never fail at one thing, that's ridiculous. I mean, Amazon is what it is right now, but I think it's Amazon that they said that they have this thing where a manager is not allowed to like downplay somebody's ideas. They got probably thousands of ideas. That's how I think they said that's how AWS came about. But AWS is one out of thousands.
Yeah.
So the other ones are failures, but that's okay. That's how life is. So if we take nothing else, we should take this and move on with that. Let's talk about Myocurrent. So you're integrating neuroscience, AI, because this is where we are right now. We have to create solutions and innovate in a way that is future facing to address the issues that we have, neuropsychiatric issues of feedback between like stress and all of that, disease and everything else that you're working on. I want to know how you're doing this. All right. So you're designing from your lived experience, but you're also learning things that will make kind of amplify that lived experience and make you innovate even better. So how has your experience been building Myocurrent?
Of course. I mean, it's been a journey. It's been a learning journey for sure. I mean, you touched on Amazon, but also looking at Facebook. A lot of these businesses, these giants, right? They started from an idea and trial and error. And that's a good thing about being an entrepreneur. It's like you have to try. You never know where that idea might come from. You see it also in music. You'll see, not uncommon to hear a musician say, the best song that everyone loves, a hit record was the least favorite song, right? And so it's more so like your output and the ability to keep going and to build the plane as you fly it, which is something that's not as intuitive for Myocurrent particularly. It's influenced by my journey, but also I don't want to build it for me, right? So it started off being like, this is something that there's an area that's missing, and there's a gap that I wanted to identify. And I know I didn't have the areas before, right? So how do I figure out how to support other women? Which means I have to talk to other women and I have to ask them what they're doing. And I've, learned so much from talking to patients who are like, hey, the challenge I'm facing is information asymmetry. Like I don't know where to find it, or also quite fragmented. There's also disinformation, misinformation overall our body. You have people who, again, with I felt too, but also they giving more in depth on what that looks like, right? Something that I didn't see from research online that I had to develop control of, that it's really no age gap, right? No age parting on thyroid. But there are situations where someone might have had their children and then had a hysterectomy, and now they have challenges from that. There's all these different unique cases that all kind of, they have a central nucleus, which is essentially what I'm using to develop. We are patent pending, so there's some elements that I might not be able to disclose, but for the most part, it's like you're looking at the pain and how does your body, how does your brain, we're looking at like cognitive behavioral therapy, like how do you essentially help with this psychological warfare that we have, that our body, we feel like our body is failing us. And this is something that exceeds not necessarily uterine fibroids, but all of the diseases that we have as women, called diseases, but the conditions that we may have. This also looks at like different life stages, right? Like perimenopause, right? There are things that your brain changes. and how do we find ways to work in harmony and not necessarily looking at like our body as a foreign object. So essentially, it's been looking at different ways to be empathetic on the women's journey and separate that into fine, especially part of that. It's been another part of building this. It's been quite interesting, as you mentioned. You touch on it, especially in Nigerian culture, and I see that's something that's actually prevalent in different other cultures. Is like the patriarchy, right? We're used to seeing men in business, and surprisingly, there's a lot of men in women's health. Right? A lot of our favorite applications that we use for period tracking and all the things are by men, right? When we think about the venture ecosystem and funding, men really are running that. And so to convince other men that, hey, you should care about something that you don't really benefit from, it's a challenge, right? And they also see dollar signs, right? So also learning the language of money, right? Learning like, hey, this actually impacts the government, right? It actually impacts like health, your staffing, and it impacts your bottom line, and talking that then as well. Another thing you touched on, which I think is also quite interesting, is that in the terms of like internalized misogyny, what I call it, with women also, they take those ideas, they also may exude that, and that's something that is also happening as well, right? Where it's like, well, this hasn't been done before. If we're not allowed to do this, and go that route. And that's something that I could go back to the convent and go back again to have parents, but I don't, because something hasn't been done doesn't mean you can't do it, right? So that has been like my overall experience, is just like finding ways of resilience, pushing through. And to be quite frank, it's been, the men have actually been receptive to it. The women are like, hey, we need it. But I think on a terms of leadership, it's finding, the right talent, right, to help push the project forward. I think it's really important. When you're building a business, you can't do everything. I mean, even if you think you're smart, you think you're crafty, and I wouldn't recommend it. You get further with the community of people, but you also have to have the right talent, right? And then this also talent changes as you go, right? So the people that can help you get to one step might not be able to help you get to another step, etc. But for the most part, it's like finding the right advocate, right? This is a problem that is dear to me. How do you, the question I've been having to ask myself constantly, how do you inspire other people to be strong about that outside of that they have as well, another part of leadership. And I also want to touch on this, is that it's one thing to learn how to be a leader, it's really how to be a follower. And followership is something that people don't really know much about. And I think when it comes to leadership, there's not really much training on how to be a leader, right? They don't train you on how to be a leader, which is probably why we've had the leaders that we've had, right? You're learning as you go, right? And so understanding, I think a great example of our leaders would probably be like Abraham, right? Where he's revered as such a great leader, or even like Martin Luther King, because they were able to learn how to be a follower, right? They also were able to work with people that they might not necessarily align with all the time, but they were able to extract something from that. They knew how to put their ego aside. And so that's something that I have strengthened in my leadership journey, which I don't think I would have gotten with my career. Yeah.
I mean, there's so many great points there, but I like what you said about we're not really trained to be leaders. It's very, very true. People are just kind of thrown into things. But I also think that sometimes people do have leadership quality, but they don't realize it because, especially in the United States, leadership, they equate leadership to titles.
Yeah.
So leadership is not the title, because if people actually realize that in their everyday lives, in their relationship with their families and their friends, they are exhibiting leadership at a very basic level, self-leadership, then when they get into those leadership positions, it's not like all of a sudden they have to now become this thing that they're not. They just have to tap into the things that they've always had. So I think that's why I do this podcast, because we're redefining leadership. Leadership is not the thing out there. Some people are better leaders than others. Some people have different types of leadership styles. But I believe that everybody is a leader, because if you wake up every day, dress up, go to school, go to work, do all those things, you have to make certain decisions. You have to convince people to do something. There's influence, you build impact. So if we can take all those things and be more intentional and be more proactive and actively participating in all of these things that happen, so that when we get into those positions, it's so much easier. And I also like what you said about, if you're a great leader, you also should be a great follower, because I worked in an industry where it was command and control. Okay, do as I say. And then the leaders want people to fear them. That's how they operate. And people think that that's what leadership is. And if you're not like that, then all of a sudden, most women are not like that typically. So that's why women feel like, okay, I'm not a leader, I'm not a great leader because I'm not like XYZ. So thank you so much for bringing that up. And I want to talk a little bit about success, because again, we talk about leadership, and I tie that to also people have the same mindset when it comes to success. So what you're designing, what you're building, you're trying to correct like a systemic thing, and that's not easy. You're trying to pretty much change behaviors while innovating something new. So, and you're dealing with people and health. So how do you determine, or how do you define success? Because you're a business, you have to make money, but also you're trying to make an impact and change the world. So how do you define success in what you do?
Of course, I'm going to answer that, but I also want to touch on something about women and leadership. What I think that's objective about leadership is that leadership is servitude. And if women by default, we know how to serve. We know how to serve people, serve each other. Sometimes servitude can be weaponized, right? Be taken advantage of, right? But we know how to serve, do that. So I think with women is we have to stop modeling what men do. We have to lead into our superpower. And I've had examples when I heard and the men wanted me to basically be a rapper, and I tried to do that. I thought that okay, that's what you do, and I recognized that one, my team didn't want that, so that's why I identified again. Two, that I didn't pick it up, that's why I identified again. So finding your authentic leadership style is amazing. Those are distant. The people who look at leadership as a dictative kind of career kind of way, they have their time as well. And again, it's the ego, right? It's ego. Ego never works, right? You're going to get burned out on that leadership. So I think you're going to be too. They'll be better off. Going to your question, success, to me, it's progress. I'm always a person. I've always been about like delayed gratification and not like having a big moment right now. To me, it's the ability to turn like possible or moving forward day by day. I'm really different. And I recently had a conversation actually today about being rigid in my plan versus like having organized, right? And so understanding that every day is not the same, and that's okay, right? Being open-minded to what the change is. And again, the consumer, the patient, the clinician, they're informing my direction. I can have a strategy and I have all this laid out, but at the end of the day, if I'm not talking to or work with people that actually help, people that I'm actually communicating with, and so the success for me is like it's like a plant. Like every day, you're watering, you're trying to see what it needs, right? You put the seeds into the soil and you think, okay, if I keep watering it to death, it's gonna be great. No, sometimes it might need sunlight. And you have to watch it. I'm a new plant. I have a plant baby. So I'm new to this plant world. But you have to watch. You have to say, okay, maybe I need to take it out to sunlight. Maybe I need to put it in the sunlight. Maybe I need to put some water. Maybe I need to do that. see it, you kind of like you're adapting as it goes, and that's something that I find that. Obviously, the big wins are great. Going through the petition and getting the email, that's always gratifying. But those highs are low, and if you're always looking for like those big moments, you don't know what to do with the time. So I'm learning to like look at those little wins of the.
Yeah, and I remember when I was going on this campaign. I haven't done it recently, but I always say celebrate all wins, big or small. And typically in my community, when I talk about like what's your win, I always have to give an example because people are always going to be like, "Oh, I didn't win because I didn't get a promotion, I didn't get a raise." But I'm like, "Did you wake up today? Did you sleep on time? Did you go to bed on time? Did you walk for 5 minutes? Did you eat an apple?" You know what I mean? So it's like, and to your point, because those things, you're training your body and your mind to just get into the habit of feeling like, oh my God, I did this. And overall, it's going to help you because when, to your point, the lows of the lows are going to come. I mean, I worked in industry for 20 years, but I've never had high highs and low lows. But in business, like I can have the highest of the high and the lowest of the low on the same day, almost at the same time, and it makes no sense. And I'm gonna say the only thing that helped me is just that I kind of got into, like, I had a quiz that was like, track your activity and not the end goal or the results that you want to get. So I'm like, I did this, I did this, I did this. I'm good. This is over there. We'll deal with it, but it doesn't take away from everything else. So thank you for bringing that up. I like to talk about legacy a lot. So you're writing a book. Oh my goodness. And you're going as far back as 1850 to talk about the history of women's pains being dismissed. And I mean, I get that because I write and I read a lot. When I was a kid, I read a lot of like books around, the historical books around African culture, like when women went through childbirth. One of my children when it was breached, and I can't even imagine what that would have felt like. That's the reason why probably there's maternal mortality or child mortality, because what are you going to do? Even across cultures, because we watch all these Elizabethan stories and childbirth was like a thing. I don't know how far you've gotten into the book, but I just want to understand, like, what have you seen that has been like quite disturbing or maybe clarifying or helped you with the work that you're doing? And what insights can you give us, to help us like navigate this thing and also support you in the work you're doing with Myocurrent?
Of course, no, thank you. Things I would say. So actually, I have a manuscript. The two things I would mention is how far medical races go back, right? And also go back to the atrocities on that women have to face when it comes to their body, and how the procedures and interventions were. I mean, the researchers deal with lab mice and other mammals, right? And how they trial and error. And we've gotten so far in medicine now, but there's a long time to get used to this pressure. So I think for me, it was like asking how they saw what fibroids were. The fibroids were always around. They were around for quite some time, but they didn't really have a name. They missed it, right? So I think for me, it was like looking at the fact that it's been around, like, but we have Viagra or balding for men, or we have these tools that are superficial coming out quite often. So I think that for me, that was validating. And I think on a global scale, Black women face, I think it's lost perspective. Black women face a high level of bias and disrespect and so many different forms, particularly also in whether professional, but also as a patient. The one thing I want also Black women to understand, there is the experience of a Black woman and the experience of the female experience, irrespective of race, or challenges that women all races also face too. look into some of the data about fibroids in particular, outside of the U.S., there are women in Brazil, there are women in Russia, Latvia, India, China that have a high prevalence of uterine fibroids. And I recall doing some field research and going to different countries. I went to Portugal, Qatar, and I was talking to women that were not from the same race as I was. And they know exactly if they had fibroid or you knew someone that had it, they know exactly what that was, right? And so this book is looking at it from a perspective to really see how similar we are. And so essentially, it's just to fill in that gap because there is not much. Again, the information on fibroid and fragmented, you have to deeper dive. I mean, you have artificial intelligence now where you can have AI, you know. But the challenge with asking AI is that AI is pulling from online, right, or where the data is. It kind of goes back to Myocurrent, is that for it to be adaptive, we're trying to feed it with the right data source, right? So, meaning we're coming from because bias is the thing. And with artificial intelligence and the direction it's going, if it's not including us, it's going to forget us. It's going to misdiagnose or underdiagnose. So the book and the school kind of go hand in hand. I'm learning these other things or other things or the data that give you a better, give you a better support.
First of all, keep us posted because I can't wait. And I'm just learning something now because, I mean, growing up in Nigeria, fibroid was a thing because you had women and relatives. But again, because it was very common, they easily dealt with it, treated it, had surgery, and things were fine. And then moving here over the last several years that I've been here, it's almost like, oh, the reason why they don't treat fibroid is because it's a black thing or whatever. But hear you now say that there are other races, people around the world that experience this. This is the reason why we have these conversations, because this is like not just one group of people, but all of these people are just kind of like pushed aside and ignored and not even talked about. It may go back to the fact that everything related to women's health is almost like a taboo to talk about, you know? For example, you're supposed to be pregnant and have children, but you're supposed to cover yourself with a tent so that nobody, all those several things going on. But I can't wait for the book to come out for all of us to read it and learn more and figure out how we're going to support. So for women, my main audience is women in STEM. I have a wider audience as well. But if you're listening to this and they've been feeling like I can't really do much in my life or in my career on the things the way I want to change the world because, they typically experience being underestimated or they feel like they have to get all these synonymous credentials and so on. What would you tell her about just kind of owning her space and just being curious and staying in her power and realizing that she doesn't really need permission to step into her next thing?
Of course, I think starts off with exactly that, being curious. I think there's a room that I love, but basically it's kind of going back to my earlier point. We took time, we might have all the answers right away before we get late. We fall into not paralysis, constantly reading and ruminating over things too, right? But just taking that step and seeing and doing answers as well. I think that's the first step would be curious. I think when it comes to owning your power, it's getting to know who you are outside of what the world calls you, your loved ones, right? Spending time with yourself, right? Knowing what that looks like. For myself, I've done the work, right? I was always in introspection. I went through moments of isolation. They always say in order to like elevate, you have to isolate. Kind of get to understand what your purpose is and what you want to do with your life, and also be unforgiving. And you may go through seasons where you might not see the result of that, but I think really be patient, giving yourself grace is the key. In whatever it is that you're doing, whatever self-discipline, understand that you're not alone, right? There's nothing that you need to figure out that hasn't been figured out, right? And the challenge with STEM at large is that women aren't always supported going to STEM. right? Whether it's a kid, maybe you were a child who that was something you were interested in, and you do something that, or maybe you were to got older and you didn't really get all the skills that you needed, and now there's a larger gap, right? You're kind of competing with other people with skills. So also maybe you read the way you're supposed to and had all the things, but you're still competing with other races. And unfortunately, people in leadership tend to look for people that they feel better. And so that's probably the man, right? With more male leaders. So I think for looking at community, and I know we're kind of over mentored a bit now, but really looking at people who advocate for you, like people really champion. You know, follow your instinct. You know who's really for you. And going, don't stop for anyone unless it's for yourself, but don't let anyone convince you.
I mean, just listening to you, because I gave a TEDx talk and part of it was around embracing your identity, leveraging it for career success. And one of the things I talk about there is self-awareness. It starts with self-awareness. Because most people, women as well, we just start absorbing what people tell us that we should be. And a lot of times we get to a certain point and we think that that is what we are, and there's this friction, we don't know why. That's why it's very important to step back and figure out who am I, and then you can move forward from there. So that is very key. And you also mentioned people say that women are over-mentored. I hear that too. And I also work with a community of women, and most of them have never had mentors as well. So it's like one of those things where it's true and it's not true at the same time. So the way I tell people to look at mentorship is this. The billionaires that have mentors. So there's nothing wrong with mentorship. But are you looking for a savior? Are you looking for a relationship to leverage for something more? I think where the issue lies is if you're looking for somebody who's just going to tell you what to do and help you out of the situation, and not realizing there's an opportunity for you to have a mutually beneficial relationship where you bring something to the table so you can take something as well and leverage that for more. So I don't think there's something wrong with mentorship. It can be mentorship and advocacy and sponsorship at the same time, but first of all, we have to know who we are and then find the person that will get us to where we're going to go versus, oh, this person is going to be my mentor because they are XYZ, but then again, it doesn't go anywhere. So I think self-awareness is like the very beginning. It's a core of everything because it helps you with every other decision you're taking. And you have a mentor that actually supports you more than a sponsor does for somebody else. In spite of the fact that people are going to tend to help people that are like them. But I believe that somebody's going to be $1 trillion company. It sounded impossible years ago. So impossible things can be possible. You may need to just have to do it differently.
You have to also be very intentional. I think being intentional is like I think you're intentional with a guide or even or maybe the leverage communicating that off the rip. You say, hey, this is who I am, this is my goal. Because sometimes too the thing with people, they don't know how to help. Not that they don't want to, they just don't know exactly how to connect that up. So you do it for them. I think if they know what the ask is, because also we're human. So if someone is, a senior vice president or C-suite, or depending on what their role is in their company, they're pulling in so many different directions. So the clearer you can be with the ask, the better they understand how they can help you. I think sometimes too, people might nurture relationships that might not be fruitful, and you're frustrated because the person doesn't have the capacity to give you what you wanted. But you would have known that you would have been intentional from the beginning. So I think it's also too is like taking accountability of our approach, right? How we're to add on what you're saying is to basically mentorship is great, right? But how are you using mentorship? And also, what can you offer them as well, right? That is beneficial to them. And having that conversation, that dialogue from the beginning, I think is quite helpful. And also being able to network across the board, not because someone is in a higher position for you, means that person you should always gravitate toward. You never know who is going to be in those positions or be over for you. You just never know. So I always say, one, be gracious and decline.
And there's something to be said about networking across too, because people are not going to be in the same position. Like I was talking to someone the other day, I was like, you do realize that your friends are partners right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you're looking at them like your friends, but think about it. One word from them carries a lot of weight. And you're like, oh, that's actually true. So network, but also don't look down or minimize networking, because especially if you're with the right circle of people, again, being intentional about being self-aware, being intentional, putting the right space. Those people are going to want to evolve, and you guys will evolve along together. You never know where that's going to take you. So thank you so much for bringing that up. And thank you. I mean, this has been absolutely awesome. So I want you to tell us, how can we find you? And how can we partner with you if that's what we want?
Of course. So you can find me. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn. You can type in Natasha Adrian Henry. On Instagram, it's at Natasha A. Henry. So we are straightforward. You can find me, message me if you ever need advice or you want to network or whatever it is you need. I'm completely accessible and completely helpful, as much as I try to be. But if you want to email me, you can email me at NatashaHenry@NYU. And yeah, any questions you have.
Oh yeah, please do. Please do. We're going to put all that information in the show notes so that you can have it. And everyone listening, please make sure that you follow Natasha Henry on LinkedIn, follow me, and tag us and let us know what you learned from this episode, what you discovered, and what you appreciated the most. Natasha is doing great work. If you can follow her, support her, wait patiently for her book to come out. Let's do it all and make this happen. By this, I mean the change in women's health and just making sure that the future is better than today. So go ahead and follow Natasha and follow me. And thank you so much, Natasha, for being here.
It's been advantageous for me as well, just being able to talk and share. And it's a great space to be vulnerable. And I love this. I love what you're doing. And I'm so happy to hear it.
All right, thank you so much, everyone. And please join us on the next episode. And let's continue to celebrate trailblazing women in STEM.